Hello everybody and welcome to the Radiator Arms. For best performance, please use the Glide API. I'm proud of my silly little nerd jokes that I insert into the opening of the episode. And damn it, nobody will take those away from me, especially not Anthony, who first off is a nerd and secondly isn't here. And Ant is not here today because he is suffering with man flu, deadliest of all the flus, but he wanted us to carry on without him. And of course, we were going to do that even if he didn't tell us to. Now, in today's episode, it's going to be all about Will. But me being YouTuber type that I am, I'll probably find a way to make it a bit about me as well. The reason I want to do this is for my thus far silent co-star. Say hi, Will.
Say hi, Will.
Now, people know myself, and I think people probably know a bit about Ant, but they likely don't know all that much about you. So I figured this would be a great opportunity to try and get to know you a little bit better. Before we do, though, I want to warm up a little bit. Now, you were talking to me about something just before we started recording, and it was the fact that you've never been pulled over by the police.
I have not. And given the fact that when I was in my younger years, I was perhaps a little bit more exuberant than I should have been, I'm very surprised about this.
So, I've been pulled over by the police a number of times. It has never resulted in anything more than a generally fairly pleasant conversation. The most memorable time was probably now about 10 or so years ago. I was with my girlfriend of the time, young lady called Katie, and we were driving out of London, going through, I think we're sort of in the Bow Whitechapel area. I was in my car at the time, I think it might have been my 6 Series, I struggle to recall. And I saw some blue flashing lights and sirens begin behind us. And my first thought in these scenarios is, this police officer has just had a call. I better get out of their way. So I kind of went to get out of their way, but they didn't go round me. And then she says, I think they're after you. They've been following us for a while. Oh, right, okay. I don't really know what I've done, but I pulled to the side. Yeah, they got out the car, walked up to the passenger window, looked at me and said, is this your partner, sir? I said, yeah. I said, okay. And they looked at her and said, are you with him? Are you? And she said, yeah. And he said, okay, have you got any ID on you? Talking to her still. And she said, yeah, I do. And they said, can we have it, please? Yeah, okay. And they looked at me and said, we'll explain this in a minute, sir. So they went off, came back with her driving license, didn't ask me for mine or anything. And they said, the reason that we pulled you over today is because your partner looks an awful lot like a current missing person.
Oh.
And they showed me this picture, and I tell you, it was an absolute dead ringer for my girlfriend.
Wow.
It looked just like her, but crucially, it wasn't her. And apparently, they'd been going the other way and seen us and done a U-turn. She'd seen them do it. I hadn't noticed. I was just paying attention to the road. But she'd seen them sort of twig us and then do a U-turn and follow us. And yeah, they clearly thought I was a kidnapper or something suspicious. I don't know. But yeah, that was the last time, in Britain anyway, that I got pulled over. Which was a bit odd, really, like not being asked for my details or nothing. Like, you know.
I mean, for all they know, the car could have been uninsured, untaxed. You couldn't have had a license, but you would have got away with it.
Yeah. Oh, there was a great episode of, police interceptor cop camera action type, these programs. And they're following this guy late at night, and his driving wasn't what you'd call drunk driving, but it wasn't what you'd call good driving either. And the cop just goes, he's got a bit of a suspicion about this. We're going to pull him over. Had a chat with him, said, look, we pulled you over because your driving appears to be a little bit erratic and inconsistent here. And, just wanted to know really about what's going on. Checked he's clearly not drunk or or anything like that? Have you got your license on you? He says, oh, no, I don't have it on me. I said, well, you should carry your license on you at all times, really. And look, just, careful how you drive, all right? On with you. They're walking back to the car. And he says, yeah, I don't think they actually returned my license to me after I got my ban. And you could see in the copper's body language, he just went, and he went, sorry, did you just say you had a ban? Yeah, I had a ban, but it was a few years ago. Right. Did you apply for your license back afterwards? Oh, no, I thought they just sent it back to you. He's like, right, okay. And he's like, you could have gotten away with this. Like, I was letting you go. You were gone. Like, and now you've just told me you got banned from driving and you didn't get your license back. Like, oh my word. Like, you've done it to yourself, really.
Oh dear. And he's probably just thinking, oh God, this is a lot of paperwork. And now we've got to get someone to recover this car. And now I have to process this person and take them back to base.
Yeah. There was another, it was a special on the ports. And they had arrested a European truck driver before I think he'd even got out, past customs, because he had in his cab an open pint glass of vodka.
Oh,
yeah. And so he was already like way over the limit. He hadn't even left like Felixstowe or whatever. And they had to test him twice because after they pulled him over, he just kept drinking.
Lads take it away like, no, stop drinking.
Yeah, they're like, it is making it worse for you because you're now going to read even more over the limit. Like, it's not going to look good for you.
Oh, dear. Oh, that's why I love all these kind of cop shows. In fact, I used to actually want to be a police interceptor back in the day. For various reasons in my life, that didn't happen. But, it's something I've always enjoyed was like the car chases and the things like that. And so I like to think I've got a good eye for dodgy motors out there as well. I love catching a dodgy motor. And then what I'll do, I'll be in the car with my wife and I'll be like, can you write down that number plate? Write down that number plate. And then I'll get home and I'll get on one of my apps to check and I'll be like, yes, no insurance. I knew it.
Yeah, askmid.com.
Exactly.
Like, is it insured? I knew it.
I knew it. You're riding dirty.
Is that the phrase, is it?
I think it's something like that. Charm Millionaire, wasn't it? The riding dirty? Was that the one?
I've never heard it called that before. That's not to say it's not called that.
I really hope there isn't some kind of second euphemism that I don't know about here.
Yeah, there might be.
Oh, Lord. Well, if anybody's going to make that kind of euphemism, it's going to be me.
Yeah. So do you know what the phrase means? Please write in and make sure to mark the email so that we can ignore it. Okay. I told you I managed to make this all about me. And within the first 10 minutes, I have. So
that's fine.
Go me. I know you're nervous about this episode. I know it. I can see it in your eyes.
Like a deer in headlights.
All right. Have you ever hit an animal on the road?
Yes, actually. I once hit 3 ducks.
Oh, no, not ducks.
I know.
Oh, everybody loves a duck.
And what happened was, though, did you know how they like to fly in formation?
Yeah.
They were flying a little bit too low to the ground.
Oh.
And I was going around, and I think this was one of my...
Oh, at least they were flying. That's not so bad, because if they were just walking, that's not cricket.
No. They were flying, and I remember I was in one of my random cheap cars at the time. It was a Vauxhall Astra, actually. It was a CX-52 BSZ, I believe it was. Not important to the story, but just telling it anyway. Anyway, I was just going along the road, and I was on the phone to my wife at the time, and through the hands-free kit, I must say as well. Naturally. And all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. I was like, what was that? And I look over into my rearview mirror, and 3 ducks have just flown over the back of the car.
Oh.
I couldn't believe it. They all appeared to have survived and flown off as well. And I'm amazed I didn't break the windscreen. I was doing like 45, 50 miles an hour.
My mum came home one day when I was I think I'd been about 16. She had her E46 330i saloon in black, lovely car with the MV2 alloys on it. And I always knew when she was home because I'd set the car's Bluetooth up with my phone. Very, very early Bluetooth I think it was like a 54 reg plate car.
So it would have been just hands-free, no audio.
Oh, yeah. And I later found out that there was something about the Bluetooth BMW used at the time, which meant it really didn't want to talk to a modern phone. Like, it just didn't like it. Anyway, I always knew it was her because where she parked the car was basically below where my bedroom window was. And my phone would always ping up, like, you know, connected to Bluetooth just before I heard the car. She got home one evening and it had been an awful thunderstorm. It was a pretty horrendous night out there. And she got home and I went to see her and she said, "Oh, James, can you look at the car for me, please? Because I think I might have damaged it. I hit a swan."
Oh.
I thought, oh, blooming heck. I was like, oh, crikey. I was like, well, I'll have a look at it. I was like, well, it's probably a good chance. Swan's pretty big. I was like, so there's a very good chance that you've probably done the bumper or the grill or something here, and I'll go and check it. And she went, no, I didn't run it over. It was mid-flight.
Oh.
So a swan mid-flight. So do you know how when sometimes, because birds are daft and they can't see glass.
Yes.
You'll be sat in your lounge at home and there'll just be a bang on the window and you get this kind of like oily imprint left. Imagine that, but basically the entire width of the windscreen. It was enormous. And it must have been terrifying because she would have been just driving along in pretty poor conditions, knowing my mother, probably not going that quickly either. And then this pterodactyl just comes from nowhere and just basically bounces off the windscreen and then carries on its business.
It was bad enough for the ducks. I remember when they hit with such force, almost let a little bit of wee out. I was like, good God, it shook me right up.
All right, so let's wind it back a little bit. So we've known each other for what, couple of years?
Couple of years now. We first met in 2022. Though, because my memory of this will be better, because obviously you meet a lot more people than I generally do.
Yeah,
is true. We first, I think I first messaged you on Instagram when I had my first Dacia Sandero, and I was like, do you fancy taking this old bucket for a drive? And you were like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, why not? We'll do that at some point. We'll get onto that. And we never got around. We never messaged again until 2022.
Yeah,
when I met you on the Jayemm test track, which is a road that is kind of about half an hour away from here, which is near where some family members live. So I do go over it regularly, and that's where I was like, oh yeah, there's this guy I've seen on YouTube, and what's it? And I know that he films in this area because I recognise it. And then one day I'm going by, and you were filming the good Lord, what was it? The Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio.
Yep.
And I think you're out with Ant as well at the time.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. And I remember pulling up in my little Mazda 2, and I can imagine that your first thought was probably, why has this guy got a massive, massive CB antenna on top of his Mazda 2? Because this was during my amateur radio period when I was really into DXing and contact speaking. So I used to drive around this Mazda 2 with like loads of antennas on the top and things like that. And I remember running the window down and said, oh yeah, you're that Jayemm on Carlsberg, aren't you? He went, yep. And I was like, oh, I've got this Maestro. Do you want to do a video? And he went, email me. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. What you doing today? I was like, I'll talk to you later. Email me. And then I was like, oh. And then I realised what's happening is you're getting shots of a car coming by. So I think I at least ruined one of your shots of that car going by while you're just sitting chatting like to this bloke about an old Maestro in a knackered Mazda 2 with a massive aerial on the top.
That is how we met. I then drove your Maestro, which has the honour of being one of the few cars where my camera has refused to stick to it. The paintwork was so good on the bonnet that after about 15 minutes, usually with suction mounts, they either stick and they'll be there for like 2 days, or they'll come off in about a minute. That one held on for about 12 minutes, and then it was on the bonnet and just went pop, and I ran over it. But luckily, the car had so much clearance, I've actually got a great shot of it just jumping off and then me going over the top of it. Actually reminds me, years ago, I did my first press car from Audi was an RS3 with the lovely 5-pot. And I wanted to do a really fancy shot of the car going over the top of a camera.
Ooh.
So I just put 2 little action cams, and they're only about 2 inches tall. Imagine they're like 2/3 of the size of a big packet of matches.
Are those Sony ones you have?
Yeah, Sony ones, yeah. So I put 2 of them back to back on the floor in front of the car. So one of them would see the car going towards you, and then the other one would see the car going away. Easy, right? Found a nice quiet little farm track where there's no issue whatsoever with just doing a bit of a launch control, everything. Put them down, loads of clearance, fine. What I didn't anticipate is how much the car squats down when you do launch control.
Right. I was wondering if this was coming.
Yeah, and as it went over, I just clipped one of the cameras and sent it flying.
Oh, no.
They survived. It was fine. I don't even know which bit of the car it hit, but yeah, the car was absolutely fine.
Oh, it's so funny when it happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because this brings us on to like a little bit more of how we actually started developing a friendship. Speaking about electronics that are broken, one of my things is my business, my day-to-day stuff is I do computer repairs, is I look after customers' computers. I've got several people from businesses to just individuals and people like yourself. And one day, I think it was your big PC you have on your wall, wasn't it? You I think you said to me, I was thinking, I've got a problem with this. Who do I know that I've met kind of recently that might be able to do this? And he thought, Will, he's about, he's a distance away from me, but not too far that he can't come down and have a look.
Yeah.
And you called me up and I went and looked and I was like, yeah, one of your water pumps is in his computer.
Yeah, because basically the big rig that you might see in some of my other videos just sort of stopped working. Yeah. And I had a suspicion of what it was, but I haven't needed to call for help with a computer for like 20 years because I built my own and I do all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, I don't need help with PCs. No. I fix the problem myself. And this happened. Water cooling is sort of something I never really dabbled in. And I was reasonably certain. And I was like, well, before I send the PC off to get fixed, a good second opinion would be helpful. And I knew this was obviously what you did for a job. Yeah. So I thought, right, let's get Will in to just have a look at it. And then we obviously we've done a lot of stuff together since, particularly with old consoles and things. Yes. And I've promised Ant that we won't spend the entirety of this episode talking about old consoles. He's picking up my old Dreamcast, which has now got a clear case. So it does look very, very trendy. And it's also had the disk drive removed.
And had something called a GDEMU put in it.
Yeah. Did you print this little orange topper?
Yes, I did. I 3D printed that myself on my 3D printer. And it's had a whole bunch. It's now got a Noctua fan in it, so it's nice and quiet. Ooh. I even when I transferred the stickers over on the bottom from the old shell. Oh,
it's even got for the modem. It's got a clear bit for the modem as well.
Absolutely,
really
which looks quite nice.
Is that an eBay thing? Is it?
That was all from AliExpress. I think it was about £80 to £100. I mean, I did a whole video on my channel of going through this thing and actually doing all this swap. And we briefly talk about how when I got this off you, it was drowned in engine oil.
Yeah,
I don't think you realised that until I spoke to you.
No, it was kept in my mother's garage, and that probably explained why it wasn't quite so healthy. I don't know what on earth she'd put in with it. I definitely didn't fill it full of engine oil. I keep my engine oil and consoles in strictly separate places. You know?
Exactly.
It's like, uncooked meat and veg. Like, don't keep them on the same shelf.
No.
Engine oil over here, Dreamcasts over here. Sorry, let's take it back a little bit further. So you're a couple of years, I think, younger than me. So you're born early 90s.
Yes.
Yeah. So were you a very car-centric family or anything like that? Or
so my dad has always enjoyed cars, but it's one of those where he had a few nice ones. So back in the day, my father's a musician. He's played Steve Harley, Quadrifoglio, Susie Quattro. Those are the two big names he was regularly with as a lead guitarist. So he was on tour a lot as well. And when he would come back from tour, he'd always buy me those Matchbox toy cars and things like that.
Yeah.
So that was one of those things which always got my obsession going with cars. And then one day, he did the coolest ever thing for me as a kid. And this is a real core memory. I had a little pedal go-kart. And I'm sure we all probably had those when we were younger. And we're a family at the time of BMW owners. My mum had an E30, a 316, and my dad had an E28 M535i, a lovely blue colour. It was the dogleg gearbox one, leather seats, the whole thing.
Proper.
That is proper nice. There's a bit of a story about that later as well.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna have to hear that.
But anyway, he'd replaced some BMW badges on his car, and he had some spare. And because I always liked the cars, the BMWs. I always said, Dad, can we go out in the BMW today? Because we also had a Ford Sierra as well, which is not a nice car. It was a estate for his workhorse for like taking his music equipment. And I said, can we go in the Beamer today? Because he had a very early CD player in it as well, which was nice at the time. He'd had Kenwood door speakers fitted to it. He had I think it was a Pioneer CD player, one of the ones which was removable as well. You could pull up the little handle and it would come out. And I always just loved listening to CDs in the car with him. It was Queen's Greatest Hits. And it was Hotel California by the Eagles.
Yep.
And a lot of the time it was stuff he was listening to in working. So we had a lot of Susie Quattro albums in there as well. So yeah, we all the kind of the fun rock music. Hence why I'm a rock musician myself. But he got these badges from Spare, and he said to me, "You've always wanted a BMW, haven't you?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, how about I make your go-kart a BMW?" And I'm like, "Oh, how are you going to do that?" And he stuck this BMW badge to the back of my go-kart. And I tell you what, when I thought I was the coolest kid ever to have existed, because I had a little BMW go-kart, and it's little things, memories like that, which it defines a point when you get interested in cars. And I think I still remember the day he brought that BMW home, and it was just, I looking at it thinking, what is this? This looks so cool. Because obviously it had the M Sport body kits on it, and it had the digital clocks, the digital dials inside for the check control system. That's what it was, the check control.
Yeah,
so you could see all of that, and you could see like check all the oil level and things like that, or sensors. And it was just so cool. So I was always a bit of a BMW diehard, and I've always loved them. I've had a E46. It was only a 318, but I had one of those. Then I had an E39 530i. My dad now, he has an F11 5 Series Touring. He's also had two E39s, a 535i V8, which was quite nice, and then the 530 I later got off him. It's always been German. It was Mercedes as well. He had this was quite a rare car he had, and another one I loved when growing up. A W124 300E Saloon, but it was the Karat du Châtelet.
Yeah.
And that was quite around. So it had a factory body kit on it, and it was this kind of creamy beigey colour car, and it had this lovely cream interior as well, and a proper wooden steering wheel. And it looks so good. In fact, in one of the previous episodes, we talk about the first cars I ever drove, and I mentioned the Hyundai Accent, or Hyundai Accident as I called it, and I forgot, no, that wasn't the first car I ever drove. Shortly before, I'd driven my dad's 300E, and I've got video footage as well of the first time I ever drove the car. I'm going to have to send it over to you. You're going to find it's hilarious. He is cacking his pants. He is so scared, and I'm going down this drive here, and I'm doing
How
this.
How old are you?
13.
Okay.
Maybe 12,
all right.
13.
Yeah.
So, but, I'm just like, oh, this is so cool. This is so fun. Yeah. Oh, I'll put my foot down. Whoa. And he's like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, no.
Exactly. So, cars is just something that I ended up just, I think a lot of people, if their parents have kind of nicer cars, they were all older cars as well. They weren't like super expensive cars at this point in time. Like this was 94, 95. He had this D-Reg BMW.
Yeah.
So it would have been cheaper then. It was, I think, about $4 or $5 He got it from a place actually near Colchester called Leavenheath. There's an Angus Buchanan BMW place there.
Yes, I know it. Yeah.
It's quite famous as well on the internet, a lot of places, for people look at almost like a car graveyard, because they have had some of the same BMWs on that forecourt for 25, nearly 30 years unsold. And they've got a little website made in the Windows 98 era, or whatever it was. It's proper, like just basic pictures and plain text. And they've still got some of these cars, and they bump up the price every year. They come back and they bump the price up of these cars, and I'm like,
I know.
No wonder you've never sold them.
He does a lot of manual swaps as well for some of the older auto cars.
Yes.
And I went there one day to maybe think about buying a car, because I'd driven past there and I really like BMWs, didn't have masses of money, and they didn't look like BMWs that should have been masses of money. But yeah, they wanted a lot. They're one of these workshops where you're like, I've never seen anyone go in. I've never seen anyone come out. What is the score here? Like, it's all a bit odd.
Well, I went in there to buy some parts for my E39. I had a weird kind of crossover style one, is the only way to describe it. It was a 2001, and it just got into the first facelift, the facelift of the E39, but it still had the older M Sport wheel with the big airbag on it. And I wanted one of the thin ones, one of the more thinner ones, the ones that were later. They just looked a bit nicer, and they're a bit nicer to hold. I don't know, I bought this one. It was about £150. £50. It wasn't too bad. But I remember looking there thinking, how do you know where anything is? This garage is top to bottom with car parts. Outside it is just car parts. They've clearly been there for like 20, 30 years. It looked such an old school garage. And I was like, how are you still in business? How are you still open?
Yeah, in the day and age of the internet,
Yeah.
I don't understand it. It's fascinating.
I've never seen any of their parts for sale on eBay, let's put it like that. They might have one, but I've looked, and when I was, you know how you search distance nearest kind of thing,
Yeah.
about 20 miles away from me, something like that, maybe a little bit more, and I've never seen any of their BMW parts up for sale on there. So they still either just are not selling any, or people are still just coming in through word of mouth.
Yeah, you do get a few businesses like that where I actually say to them, like, I think your website might be a hindrance because, yeah, it looks like it's an ancient, 56K optimized website. You know what? Okay, so we're both geeks here, right? I went on somebody's website the other day. I can't remember what it was, but there are certain things I see and all of a sudden the nostalgia just hits. And their website, it had a hit counter on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I remember those.
I mean, like when you used to do like GeoCities websites and stuff like that, everybody was obsessed with hit counters on their website.
It's like the early YouTube analytics style thing.
Oh, yeah. And guest books.
Yes.
Hit counters and guest books. Bring them back. I mean, in fairness, I suppose, I've got a YouTube. You're just like, it's got the likes, it's got the views, and it's got comments.
Exactly.
Like,
There's your guest books.
Hit counters and guest books. That's all it's about. There's a couple of other garages a bit like that one as well. There's one just near the Black Cat roundabout, which is kind of like sort of Bedfordshire, I think, still technically. And it's a Volvo place, and it's just like a graveyard of Volvos, and you can only get to it as well one side of the motorway because it's just off the A1, and it's really inaccessible. If you're going the other way, you have to go down to the roundabout, turn around and get back to it and everything else, and then when you get away from it, you're going completely the wrong direction again. And again, I've been past it probably 200 times and never seen anyone go in, never seen anyone come out, and it just seems to be filled with like 80s, 90s and early noughties Volvos in various states of disrepair. And the other one, you may have seen it, is a place called Trophy Cars, which is just off, I think it's the A1, but much further up. That. And all they sell is MGFs and MGTFs.
Yeah.
That's it. And the thing is, they're on the side of a dual carriageway. They're in literally the worst possible place to sell a nice, nimble little British sports car, because the first thing that you do is have to put your foot down, which is, of course, not ideal. And there's no corners. There's no corners anywhere around there. It's a motorway. And their prices also all seem to be, let's call them, optimistic. Like if I want to know how much is too much for one of those cars, I just see what every brand has those businesses where like, oh, you see it at this place, oh crikey, that's going to be like, it's way overpriced, it will still be there 3 years later.
I think there's a place, a company, is it KGF Classics? I don't know if you've seen this. It's something like that, and they've always got cars up, because I see that a lot in the old Maestro pages. People have taken like these Maestros that they've sold for a couple of grand, then suddenly they're up at these places cleaned up a bit for like 8 or 9 grand. Nobody is buying a 1.3 litre Maestro for 8 or 9 grand, no matter how low the mileage is or the condition.
There was at another little independent dealer a Honda Accord Type R, like 2001 era, which is a really cool car. I'd love to have one.
Is that DC5?
No. That's an Integra.
Oh yeah,
that's an Integra. So I can't remember. I think it's a CH1 or something as the chassis goes. CL1. I can't remember. I think it's CL1 might be the Euro R. Anyway, this car, I'd seen it for sale privately at about 4 grand. It then went, and a couple of months later reappeared at this dealer for 10 grand. Which, you know what? It's a lot more money, but if they'd taken it in, done a whole bunch of welding, gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, service, sort the paint, like you can easily sink a few £1,000s into one of these cars, and if everything else about it is right,
that makes it acceptable.
Maybe it's okay. Like, look, if you put some work into it, like, and you I'm not one of these people that goes, well, hang on, but you bought it for 4 grand, you spent 4 grand on it, so I'm going to give you 8 grand. Like, no, that's not how business works. Of course they can take a little bit of profit.
Can I stop you here? Because I think
can.
I know where this is going. By any chance, have they just taken it and literally put it on with nothing done to it and all the same faults in place and put up for sale?
It's worse than that.
It's worse.
They copied the original description as well.
Really?
Yeah, so it even has stuff like, yeah, I've had this car for such and such number of years. And it's like, no, you haven't. And what's even worse is I looked at buying another car and the guy was pricing it based on the price of this one being at 10 grand. He's like, well, my one's really good value because the other one's 10 grand. It's like, yeah, mate, the other one was 4 grand. And now they're claiming it's 10 grand and they've done nothing. It is not worth 10 grand. I'm sorry.
This is something I see online a lot, not just with cars, with a lot of stuff. People see what stuff is up for and they assume that's what it's worth.
Yeah.
No, what somebody prices it for is very different from what it actually sells for.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like when you're looking at stuff on eBay, if when I want to get an accurate figure of what something is worth, I'm trying to sell
Hit
it.
the sold button.
Exactly.
Yep.
Sold, completed listings. These are what they've gone for. Okay, this is the ballpark I'm going to put it up for it.
Yeah. You're asking 600 quid, mate. No one's ever sold one for that much. It's get 300 quid on a good day.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah,
Come on now.
absolutely.
I've been buying a lot of old hi-fi stuff recently, and yeah, it's exactly that. Especially if you get to sort of really weird and rare stuff where you can't, you like, if there's 30 of them up for sale, you can get a pretty good idea where the market's at. When there's like one for sale and someone's asking what seems like a lot of money, yeah, sold, completed listings, best button on all of eBay. It just tells you everything you need to know.
Well, it's like I was telling you over lunch we had earlier today, that I bought a part for my Maestro, which is just a gearbox mount, because the Apple car I had it's been scrapped because it was just too far gone, and lots of parts from that went to go onto the car that I pulled out of the barn, which we spoke about in another previous episode, and what I forgot to do was take one of the brackets off the body for the 5-speed swap, because I've got the 5-speed gearbox, which I want to transplant into the 4-speed car.
Yeah.
And I ended up paying £40 this bracket on eBay. I don't know if that's good value or not, because I don't know what they sold for. I've waited a year for one to come up. Nobody on any of the forums had one.
Yeah.
So as far as I know, well, that's what they're worth now, because I'm the one that's paid for one. If somebody else is looking for one, 40 quid is what they're worth.
Yeah, and I suspect if you are buying a part for, say, a Golf of similar vintage, there'd probably still be places you can buy stuff like that from new.
Yes.
Yes. Because it's a Golf, it's popular. Like, you can do whatever you want to it.
This is one of the things with that particular car, the Maestro, is parts availability is starting to dry up for it, and it's just a lot of places aren't making reproduction parts for it because there aren't that many left and they're not worth enough.
Well, you've got that problem, haven't you? A car like the Maestro, let's be honest here, it wasn't really particularly loved in its day.
It still really isn't that much love now.
It was never going to enjoy the classic status that a Golf does. Just never going to happen. However, they did make a lot of them.
Yes.
Relatively speaking. And so for a long time, there would have been a natural source of spare parts because people were breaking them. But I suspect, and we didn't really touch on this in our previous episode we recorded solo, the scrappage scheme will have taken a lot of Maestros off the road. Because they were the sort of car that a load of people I know, grandma had held onto hers, and I think, wasn't it, you just needed to have owned the car for 12 months. So lots and lots of cars that had been owned for just over 12 months or so were taken to the scrappy, and a lot of them were perfectly good working cars that didn't deserve to go to a scrappy.
Absolutely not. Because the thing is, the Maestro has always been a bit of a laughing stock in many regards, and in some ways I totally get it, but it's fundamentally, as a car, especially 20 years ago or so, it's not a bad car. They're actually pretty reliable, especially if you get the ones with the A series in. There's not a lot to go wrong with them. It's a simple SU carb. It's got electronic ignition from factory. As long as you do the preventative maintenance and things like that, they will just go. I know that when I go to that car, which has been stood up for about 4 or 5 months now, I'll do my basics. I will take the spark plugs out, give them the quick clean, just make sure it all looks good in the engine and that's rotating by hand. I'll put those back in. I'll take off the distributor cap. I will give all the contacts a little clean, put them back on, and that car, after 10-20 seconds of cranking to get the fuel from the fuel tank up through the mechanical fuel pump into the carb, it will just go. It will. I promise you it will go.
So quite a few years back, my dad had a few cars in storage, and he decided he wanted to have a bit of a clear out. And one of the cars that he had was a red 1966 Mini Cooper with a black roof. Now, he'd bought that car on a bit of a whim because he'd had a few Minis back in the day. My mum had a Mini Red Hot when I was a baby, effectively, and she had to sell it, much to her disgust, because she couldn't fit my pram in it. But she loved that car because it cost a £5 to fill up and it would go forever and it was great. And I've tried to buy her a Mini Red Hot as like a sort of, sorry, mum, I cost you your car. But I've looked for years and I can't find one. It was a special edition. They did two, a Mini Red Hot and Mini Jet Black, back in like the late 80s when Minis were already pretty old, but they were still trying to keep them going, you know. Many moons later, my dad, by this time my parents were separated, but dad decided that he wanted to buy himself a Mini. And found this gorgeous red 66 Mini Cooper. Not S, just Mini Cooper, but lovely looking thing, a real classic look about it. And he bought it from a young lad in town, and it looked like he'd really mucked around with this car. You know, it looked like it was all modified and everything. But actually, the young lad didn't have any money to modify it. All he'd done is put some really horrible wheels on it, and that's all he could afford to do. So Dad got the car, bought it, didn't pay very much for it, and put the correct wheels back on it, drove it a couple of times and sort of just forgot about it, basically. Because it's a Mini, it's not very big. He had a warehouse for work, so stuck it at the back of the warehouse and it just sat there. It then got moved off to some better car storage because he knew he wasn't going to use it. He then realised that in the time he hadn't used the car, it doubled in value. So he thought, right, well, it's sat at the back of the shed, haven't even driven it for 2 or 3 years, don't have the time, and it's a Mini, right? They're basic by modern standards. They're not the sort of car you want to go for a big trip on. Got other cars for that, so flog it. So he said, James, can you go down, take some photos of that? And he had his Ferrari 355 at the same storage, and he was thinking of selling that as well. I didn't want him to, but he's like, look, can you also get some photos of that? Yeah, of course I can. So I went down to the storage unit, and this storage unit is basically a really big garage attached to this chap's house where he stores people's cars. And it's a gravel driveway with a little bit of a hill to get you up to the top half of the garden. And he said, look, don't take any photos down here because obviously you can see the house in them. Get up the top where the background's just nice and plain. Yeah, cool, fine. The Mini was already running, and he said, right, there's a little clothes peg holding the choke in place, which it needs to, because if the choke goes back in, it'll die, and the choke won't hold itself in place. Quite an old school technique, but, you know, hey-ho, whatever, right? Old car. And he says, just watch out for it, because it's a little bit, I think, pernickety is maybe the word he used. So I get in this thing, and I try to put it in gear, and it just dies. Right, you try and give it any amount of clutch, it just dies. Okay, fine. So you got to try and rivet a little bit. Problem is, though, there's no synchro on first. So you're going into gear, and you're okay, right, fine. But then, because I'm on loose gravel, you then wind up spinning the thing a little bit. See, oh, great, lad. So you but it didn't want to hold in gear. So I'd get it about 4 yards down the road and it'd pop out of gear. So I'm trying to move this thing, crunch into gear, spin the wheel, and then boom, out of gear. Like, oh, Christ, come on, clutch back down. I moved this thing 30 or 40 yards up this hill, got out of it, slammed the door in fury, gave it every single expletive that I could muster. Didn't understand why anybody would ever want to drive or own one of those things, ever. Took my photos of it, and if I'd had my way, I would have just pushed it down the hill with the handbrake off and just let nature take care of it. The Ferrari, meanwhile, the temperamental, fidgety, horrible to own and use Italian supercar that hadn't gone anywhere for 3 years, got in it, turned the key, fired up, drove it to the top, got out, took my photos, drove it back down. Good as gold. Did not sputter, did not complain, nothing. Perfectly well behaved. So simple, so easy. And I was so frustrated that I knew when Dad phoned, he phoned in advance to tell him, no, he's not on the insurance for the Ferrari. He can't take it anywhere. And I was like, oh, grumble, grumble, grumble. You spoiling my fun, not allowing me to take the car out. I mean, I wouldn't have anyway, because I was quite a law-abiding young man.
Yeah.
I mean, I got offered a drive of his Cayman once, and I wouldn't have been insured on it. And it would only have been like a mile down the road, but the conditions weren't great. And I was like, look, thank you very much, but no, because if something happens, we're both in big trouble here. And also, it's a bit of a rubbish wet day. Like I don't want to. I won't enjoy it. You know, and I have had that a few times where people have offered me a go in a car, and you think, right, everything in life like this is risk versus reward. You're like, if you're not actually going to enjoy it, like, why do it? So, back to you. I did warn you I'd make this about me.
Yeah, that's fine.
So you're a bit of a BMW man, but you're currently BMWs. Which was the last one that you owned?
It was my 530i.
E39.
Yeah, the E39. And I only got rid of that because somebody drove into the side of it.
Oh,
Well,
no.
I took a temporary job in 2017, for 2016. Yeah, 2017, Christmas of 2017, because I just started to get some bad health problems again coming in and out. And I've had, for the people at home, I've had lots of digestive gut problems in and out over the years. Sometimes they're better than they are, and then other times they're just not. So I had a job and I wasn't coping with it. So I finished that job and I just didn't have a lot of money at the time. This was before I went self-employed anyway. And I got this job at just some retail place. I'm doing 3 or 4 hours, I think, every other day here and there. And anyway, I parked the car outside. What was even worse is I'd actually taken it off the road for winter, but I missed it so much that I put it back on and decided to drive it, which was my biggest mistake.
No.
My biggest mistake. And I brought it down to what this was like literally a couple of days after I'd put it back on the road as well. Brought it down this work, parked it out back, working away, and suddenly I had this big bang outside, and I was like, what on earth was that? And I came outside and I'd seen that my car had moved at the rear about 2 inches over, and I was like, that's not right. And then suddenly there's this Mark V Golf brimmed with lads. So even then, I'm not going to say anything anyway, because if I do, I'm going to end up just like my BMW.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, full of holes and just smashed to pieces.
Yeah.
So I looked and I just saw them driving off, and I looked at the number plates and I was like, right, okay, this is an Irish registered car. I was like, right, okay, this is going to be easy for the police to spot. Call up the police. I get on touch of the control room, and I was like, these guys in this Irish registered Golf have just driven into my car, and then they've gone off straight away. And the police officer said, oh, okay, all right, yeah, all right, so I've got some more information, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, so are you going to send somebody out to get them?
Yeah.
They said, oh, no, we have to wait 24 hours. I said, what? They said, oh, yeah, you have to lodge the complaint online and fill a form, and then somebody within 24 hours will go out to look at it. And I said, by the time 24 hours have gone, do you know where they'll be?
Because they could be drunk as well. There could be anything going on. Like if they've already done a hit and run.
Exactly. And this was also, this car park was shared with a pub too. So it was one I just said to them.
Because how would you feel? If they're like, okay, your car's been dented and damaged. That's bad. But like, what if like 3 miles down the road they hit and kill someone?
Yeah, absolutely. But I just said to the police officer in the control room, I said, well, I'm not going to bother, because you know why? They'll be back in Ireland. That's where they're going to go. They're going to go somewhere and...
So I got a couple of good stories on that. I remember once, it was at the weekend, Dad got a call, and all of a sudden he started to look very serious. I was like, oh, you're right, Dad. And he goes, no, the alarm's gone off at work. The back door to the unit has been opened. Ooh. I was like, oh, okay, all right. He said, yeah, I might have to deal with this. He's like, give me a minute. He phoned the police and said, look, the alarm has been triggered. The back door of the unit has been opened. Now, either it's just sort of somehow blown open in the wind, like if someone didn't lock it properly, or it's been forced open, But this was like Saturday afternoon, and you'd think if it wasn't open, it wasn't shut properly, it would have done it, Friday night. Mm. And do you know what their response was? They said, well, we can't go down there because there might be somebody there. Is it what you can't go there because there might be a criminal on site?
Exactly. A friend of mine had her phone stolen in London recently, and it was by the scooter gangs. I've heard about those people with
no, I've
scooters.
seen that, yeah.
And she had obviously the Find My on the Find My iPhone through iCloud, and they gave the police officer the exact address and everything, and they said, "Oh, we can't do anything about that. I was like, it's part of something bigger. It's part of something bigger, so we're not ready to go in yet." And she just said, "Well, do you know what? I'm just going to go down there with a couple of friends, and we'll see if we can get it back." They said, "Oh no, you can't do that. If you do that, we'll have to arrest you because you'll be interfering with an ongoing bigger picture thing." And I'm like,
so you know what fascinates me, right? Is I'm a motorcyclist. I'm full license and everything, and the people that ride motorcycles and bicycles, particularly in London, like we live in a rural part of East Anglia. Now, whenever I go into any town, the cyclists pretty much always have their lights on. They're generally fairly well behaved and they're pretty decent. When I go into London now, I would say it's almost a rarity to see a cyclist with a light on. Typically, they're also wearing dark clothing as well. Now, this might sound a bit controversial, but I think if you are cycling around London at night when it's dark and you have no lights on your bicycle and you have no high visibility protective clothing on you, and you feel perfectly content to flout the rules of the road, that you should probably be fed foot first to an industrial mincer. Because one of these days, like if I've been watching Breaking Bad recently, right? And if one day I am told that I have inoperable cancer, because we live in Britain, I won't have to start a meth empire to make sure that my family are going to be looked after because, we have the NHS. However, I am very tempted to get a bunch of bicycles and screw them to the side of one of my cars and drive around London running every red light that I can find and just mounting the path as and when it's convenient to me and sowing discord amongst the world of men until I get pulled over, just so that I can be dragged to court and go, "Oh, I'm very sorry, officer. I thought if it was a bicycle doing it, that it would be okay. And because I've built myself a big cage out of bicycles, that it would be all right," because they're psychopaths. The fact I haven't seen somebody killed there is absolutely astonishing. And to me, I think this should be the law. I don't think you should be allowed to use a motorcycle for business purposes if you've got L plates still. Right? Because to get an L plate in Britain, which would then allow you to ride a motorcycle up to 125cc, which in town is blooming quick, right? Or you can even have an electric something or other, I think, as well, as long as it's power limited. All you need to do is attend basically a sort of half-day training course called a CBT.
Were they not talking about making the CBT course a lot harder, a lot more involved?
There's always discussion about it, and it's always a bit of a 50-50 of like, well, car drivers don't have to do this, yes, but motorcyclists are kind of at risk. And I always feel like the motorcycle test has gotten so much more complicated and difficult since I did it versus the car test, which is still mostly the same. Like some of what you do changes now. You drive with there's a portion you do following a sat nav, which didn't exist when we did our test. But yeah, I just think it's utterly and completely fascinating that's the way that they work. But it boggles my mind, because also, let's face it, like, yeah, okay, motorcyclists do have accidents, but half of them are caused by cars. So I think, like, surely if you want to stop this and make it better for everybody, you should teach the car drivers a bit better, but they don't.
It's interesting with motorcyclists and how they ride. I would say a majority of the motorcyclists I meet out on the road as I'm driving are very sensible, very respectful. They're aware of their own mortality.
Yeah.
But I always do find that occasionally there is that a few percent of them which are the most maniac I've ever seen. I never see car drivers doing quite what some of the motorcycle drivers do.
Oh no! So I was at a
risk taking.
I was at a meet in summer. Not even a meet really. It's just a local village, which is well known get together for petrol heads, particularly bikers. And it was a nice summery day, and I took a bike down there. And I went down there with a friend, and we were having a Diet Coke or whatever. And there's a whole bunch of nice bikes out there, from Suzukis to Harleys. Somebody turned up on an electric bike, which I thought was quite fascinating. I was having a good look at that. And then these 4 lads turn up on sports bikes with seriously loud pipes and tinted number plates hidden right up behind the rear wheel where you can barely see it. And you just look at them.
You know what they're doing.
You are out to be knobs, aren't you? Like, you are here to give everybody else. Like, motorcycling does not have a great image as it is. It's struggled with that for a long time, and it's been a situation that's kind of perpetuated itself for a long time, and it's seen improvements, but in some ways it's also gone backwards a little bit. But when you see people like that, you're just like, I guess the car world has its equivalents as well.
I know what the equivalent is. It is the equivalent of somebody in a diesel Skoda Fabia with the EV numplate with the green bit, the green bit on the back of it, limiter bashing it and spewing smoke everywhere.
Yeah. You're talking about the sort of car where the back of it is black.
Yes.
From all the soot that comes out.
I think they call it a Reeky D or something like that. Yeah, a Reeky D. A Reek tune.
Britain's answer to Rolling Coal.
Exactly. A Reeky D.
Oh my God. All right, so let's break this up a little bit. In the previous video that we recorded together, we were talking about the joy of cheap motoring, and I set us both a challenge to find some interesting stuff that cost less than 5,000 of your Earth pounds. Now, we showed each other a couple of different bits. I had a little Renault Clio Dynamique 1.2. It's pretty good. I had a Peugeot 205 diesel. That's even interesting. I even found a Pontiac Fiero for less than $5,000, which, I mean, is a brave buy. But here's some other cool stuff. I love the description of some of these. Now, you see, I thought I'll be cheeky. I went over to Car and Classic as well to see what was on there. I found this second generation, so 2006 BMW 630 Ci, which is simply a quite essential example. Interesting.
Okay.
Yours for $4,995. They're quite good cars, those, but I prefer them with the V8 because it's a big car. It needs the 8. Also, you could have this. This is quite sexy for $4,995. You get this lovely red Peugeot RCZ
I like
GT,
an RCZ.
the 200 horsepower engine, probably the best engine as well. 84,000 miles. Yeah, $4,995 at a place called Driven Heroes.
I think they are great looking cars, though.
But this, I think, is a PCU. Now, this is a 1992.
Yep.
Left-hand drive.
Okay.
Yellow. Mercury Grand Marquis.
Oh,
It's
look at that.
Old New York cab, basically.
Look at that.
Only apparently it wasn't a New York cab. Somebody did it up to look like a New York cab.
Oh, I like that.
It's a
I'm
bit of
into
you,
that.
isn't it? Right?
I love a big boaty wallowy saloon. It's what I'm all about. That.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You love
all
that
about
saloon
a
life.
Loftmobile.
What colour was your E39?
It was Orient blue.
Okay, yeah. I know the colour. That's a classy colour.
It was classy until I lowered it and welded the diff.
See, I can't recall my dad ever having a 5 Series. He had a number of 3s. And most of them, I think, sort of before I really remembered or sort of cared about cars so much. He had an M3, E36 M3 pre-Evo. He had one of those. And he also then later bought probably one of the best cars he ever had. He bought this would be an E38 735i. Not particularly powerful, but a buttery smooth thing. It was in a red over black leather interior. I got to drive it sneakily a couple of times when we found the opportunity. I wasn't on the insurance, but there was a couple of times when we were on private land and I could just have a little bit of a go. And I remember it not really being very fast because it was a V8 and I was like, "Ooh, V8." And he's like, "Don't get your hopes up." Like, it's not that quick. But it was a real lesson in what something like a 7 Series is all about. I love that thing.
Absolutely.
He had it for 6 months. I think he had to put a bulb in it and sold it. And I think immediately regret it because he's like, why did I do that?
The thing that was interesting about them then is all the V8s in the 7 Series, or I don't know if it was a 7, but certainly in the 5 Series, they all ended up going recirculative ball steering, didn't they? They all ended
So
up getting rid of the rat. They couldn't-
E39 is the last one. Yeah, all of the V8s, including the M5, still recirculating ball.
Now, you've driven the E39 M5, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
How do you find the steering on that with the steering?
all right.
Because I remember I had a Mercedes, I had a W202 estate. It was the C200 compressor, supercharged.
Oh, yeah.
It was only about 163 horsepower, so it didn't really go much. But I remember the steering was just horrendous. There was so much free play in it. And I did everything I could to tighten up the worm drive on the box and replace the steering arm damper. And I said, I never want to own a car with a steering box again because it is just joyless and soul killing. But I think
you need to get the box refurbished.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only solution. It's not cheap.
I was going to say, I think probably in hindsight, it's a case of it was just worn out, I imagine.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Like, it's never going to be great, but it should be all right. It is a weak point of the M5. It's a bit of a disappointment in that regard, but you know what? It wouldn't stop me owning one of those cars.
No, absolutely not. That is a dream car. I want to talk about my dream cars quickly. The ones.
Oh no, you're going to talk about your dream cars slowly. I want to hear all about this because we often talk about, like, we spent a whole episode just talking about the more affordable end of the market because we both got a passion for it.
Yes,
but I want to know if young Master Will wakes up to a lottery win and more than the £11.20 that I won on the Euro Millions this morning. What are you going shopping for?
There are a few things I'm going for. The first thing I'm doing is I'm walking into an Alfa Romeo dealership, the Giulia Quadrifoglio. That is like because I love fast saloons. I think that is just one of the best looking saloons out there, in my opinion. It's beautiful. It's got that is it the bi-turbo? Is it a V6? But it's apparently Ferrari California derived engine.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. It's basically 3/4 of a California T's engine.
Yeah, and they've done a facelift on it again. So they've actually got nicer LED headlights on it. So the front end looks better. They've made the interior a bit nicer too with newer touchscreen and CarPlay, up to date a bit more. And yeah, that is where I'm going. I'm buying one of those in that lovely electric style blue color they have.
Yep.
Yeah, that is a dream. In fact, I don't know if you ever saw it. They did renders of that back in the day when there was possibly going to be an estate version of that. If that had come out, an estate Giulia Quadrifoglio, I think I would have sold both of my kidneys and just relied on dialysis to own one of those, because my God, that would have suited me right down to the ground.
Oh yeah.
And then I'm going for a Ferrari 355. That is one of them, because I'm not big into the supercar world, really. I'm not really big into race cars and things like that, as I think we've discussed. But there is something about 90s Ferraris and things like that that actually I've got an interest for. And I've said it before, I've had more of an interest in them since we've been hanging out and I've been watching your content. That has kind of made me develop more of a love for it, because you took the Scud on to into, where's it you took again? Andorra, wasn't it?
Andorra, yeah.
Andorra. And I remember seeing the video you found out there and I was like, okay, do you know what? That is epic. Because I've seen it before. I've been on your driveway and looked at it. I thought, yeah, it's a nice looking car. That looks cool. But
have I even taken you out in any of the Ferraris?
You haven't. I haven't been out in it. I haven't been out in any of your cars yet.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, we'll fix that.
We'll fix that at some point. But now, after looking at that video, I thought the sound of that, it just looks just phenomenal. And the way that looked, that car there just was so right to me. Like, I know it's not all about the car you take, because I think, as you said in your video on it, it's just being there, the roads and things. But on that backdrop, I just thought, that looks beautiful.
You know, I think something happens when you do something like that with a car like that. I think the general perception from a lot of people is that you own cars like that because you want everybody to look at you and you want to be a flash gimboid. And I think there's a general misconception that somehow it will attract the opposite sex. It does not. It really doesn't. I mean, maybe it's me negating the effect of the car. I don't know. But not once in my entire life have I had a lady walk up to me and make a comment basically about the car with, a goal in mind, let's say. I think I probably can count on one hand the number of times that ladies have even commented on a car, like offhand, outside of car shows and whatnot. What it does do is start a lot of conversations with blokes.
Yes.
And, you know what the best car for it actually was? The Evora.
Okay.
Because the Evora is very clearly an interesting, sporty, spicy car, but most people don't know what one is. So when you go out in like a fast Porsche or something, they're almost the least satisfying of them all, because I've been out there in some really properly exotic stuff. GT3s, turbos, all that sort of thing. And maybe on occasion you'll get like oh, nice car, mate, or yeah, nice Porsche, mister. Like, that's pretty much it. You go out in Ferraris or a Lambo or something like that, it's a totally, totally different thing. People go gooey-eyed for them. People love them. Like, people make comments about them that you wouldn't really expect to, and it's almost always positive as well. And there's a lot of people out there that don't like the idea of owning a Ferrari, including those that could definitely own a Ferrari, because they're like, oh, well, I hear stories about, someone who got their car, keyed because it was a nice car, or, someone spat on it or whatever. And you're like, well, frankly, I think that's just a damnation of certain people. But also, I think often, if your car's been damaged, it's generally got more to do with who owns the car than what the car actually is,
I was about to say, from the way I've got to know you, you're not a flash git in any way. I know people like to think that sometimes, and I saw a comment on something to those effects the other day, and I'm like, no, that's not James. He has nice cars because he likes them for the car and for the machine they are, not because he wants to look like a big rich man.
No, but what you get is you just get this amazing, like, bubble of interest. Like, you just drive through town in a Ferrari and get people looking and turning and they're staring. And I like to remember when I was 17. I know that because I was on my Gilera Runner VXR 200, but I was still living at home. It was just before I went to university. And I'd dropped my girlfriend off. Now, we were living in Bury St Edmunds at the time. For those who know Bury, it's a very nice little Suffolk town that's got the A14 running through it, which is, for all intents and purposes, a motorway. And there's 3 different exits you could get off at Bury. There's like west, central, and east. Now, my girlfriend, her family lived over by the west exit, and I lived at the east exit. So it's pretty easy. You just drop her off onto the motorway, 2 junctions down, off, and within about 2 minutes, I'm home. So I was on my Gilera. I'd dropped her off. Was coming home. And it's still there. There's a BP filling station with a Wild Bean cafe attached to it.
Yes, I know one.
And I was driving past, it's right opposite the garden centre, for those who know Bury. And there was a chap, this is like 10 o'clock at night, by the way. There was a chap filling up a Diablo.
Oh.
Now, I went past this fuel station, and the next thing you come to is a big roundabout. So, of course, at this roundabout, I turned around, did a big UE, and as I was coming up to the petrol station, he was leaving. So I got to hear him pulling out the petrol station and then give it a bit of beans as he heads off into the night. And even now, that was 18 years ago, and even now, I feel warm and fuzzy thinking about that, because when do you see a Diablo out and about? You just don't. I was walking home from school one day and we saw a noble M12 just parked up in traffic. Again, for those who know Bury St Edmunds, it was by the petrol station near the toll gate. And that was incredible. I once saw a Challenge Stradale just parked casually outside the back of Woolworths. And I'd have been less impressed if you'd parked the Starship Enterprise there, That to me was just... It was just unbelievable. It was like seeing a film star, because we'd seen these cars on TV, we'd seen them in movies. I mean, how much does your obsession with a 355 have to do with either The Rock or GoldenEye?
Actually, I can tell you where my 355 obsession started, which was when I was going back through old Top Gear archives, of all things.
Okay.
And it was the Clarkson one where he went into the showroom and he ordered his 355 and things. Yes. Do you remember that one?
Isn't that Clarkson's car years?
Oh, yeah, that might have been what it is. Clarkson's car years. So it was that, and he was almost going to order it. Didn't he? He wanted a green one, but he ordered a red one in the end, didn't he?
And didn't want a GTS, but wound up getting a GTS because people told him to. He wanted a green coupe.
Yes. The
And then wound up
GTS is
buying
the
a-
Targa top one, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I quite like the GTS. So it was the last time Ferrari did a Targa top.
Was it?
Yeah. With the sort of exception, this is proper anorak stuff, by the way. When they went to the 360, you then had the coupe, the Modena, and you then had the Spider as a soft top folding roof, which actually was a very, very nice job, and I don't think it's the credit for being actually quite as good as it is, because we look at it now, and by the context of modern roofs, it's a bit basic. But when that roof folds away, the 360 Spider looks spectacular. First convertible to have a clear engine cover, so you can still see the engine. But they did also do a incredibly rare option of a 360 with a sunroof. So it was a detachable sort of trapezoidal shaped panel that could pop out of the roof like a Targa panel and then slot behind the seats like it does in a 355. But I've actually seen a couple advertised with it, and it's a very cool thing. But yeah, I think they said something like a dozen maybe were sold, like in the entire production run of like 15,000 cars or something. So yeah, it's rare.
The 360, is that the one of the cheaper, more common model ones that you can buy now? Is that it's because
360 is probably your cheapest entry point into a Ferrari that's going to be new enough that it's still going to be exciting to drive, but isn't, old and rubbish enough that it's going to be like, trying to run a proper classic.
They're not going to be the temperamental queens that the 355s are.
Yeah, they are.
Are they? I suppose all Ferraris, I guess, are a bit temperamental.
Do you know what the big problem is? They don't get used.
Yeah.
They don't get used. They don't get driven. People sit on them for ages. And what happens is the list of jobs that needs doing gets bigger and bigger and bigger until you get an idiot like me come along that likes to drive their cars. And then I try and drive it and I realize all of the many, many things that should have been dealt with before and haven't been.
Have you ever had a 360 or have you
driven a bunch of them? I've never owned one.
Never owned one. Would you?
Yeah, I would actually. Yeah, I would. Probably a Spider, actually, because it would be different to whatever it is that I've got.
Here's the question. Would you go F1 or manual?
Manual. Yeah, all the way.
Yeah, fair enough. I feel like I'm the same. I haven't felt a gated shifter before, but I've heard the click of them, and I just think they probably are quite nice to use.
Yeah, they're very satisfying. We'll get you out in the 550 at some point, because that makes more click-clack than the 360s does. The 360s are quite light, and it doesn't make the noises as often.
I'm laughing because I've just remembered I saw an advert for an Audi TT the other day when I was helping look for someone, a first-generation one, and somebody had fitted a gated shifter to the Audi TT. And I was like, why have they done that?
Yeah, that is a bit strange.
Oh, I'll tell you a few of the other dream cars then.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get back to me as it's my episode, apparently.
Yeah, damn right.
Exactly. The Porsche 356, the old one, the one that was which I got interested in because of the Need for Speed Porsche 2000 Challenge game.
Yep.
And the Spider of around that era as well. I just thought they're beautiful.
And you know what? I have driven a 356C.
Yep.
I've got an offer to drive a Pre-A. So the very, very first offer.
Is that 1950s, that 40s?
I don't know that specific car, but they came out in, I think, 48.
Yeah.
Now, the reality of cars is that when you get back to stuff from the 1950s, it's not necessarily that much of a leap on from 1930s tech, because it did take, obviously, a lot of car makers didn't necessarily pause, but they also didn't do masses of development during the war. And it took a little while for the upgrades and improvements and things learned during the war to then make it through to public transport. And of course, for a long time, people didn't have much money. So they deliberately didn't improve cars because they wanted them to stay cheap. So when you drive something from the 1940s, you know what you're driving is basically an interwar, technology. I drove the 356C with very low expectations because, it's a car. That one was from the maybe even very early 60s, but, at best 50s. And, you know what? It was blooming delightful. Like, it was actually, you could just get it. Like, I could, if we had a 356 here, I could just hand you the keys with no instruction.
Yeah.
You could get out there, drive it, and have a really good time.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great pub car.
Yes.
Because, yeah, it's old. It's not particularly safe if something goes wrong. But to just have a nice drive out on a sunny Sunday afternoon in Britain, what a delight. Real positive surprise.
Well, that's nice to know. I think they're quite expensive now. I think
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, which is a shame. So I'll more than likely never have one.
As are Carmen Gears.
Yes. Yeah, they are, aren't they now? Very expensive.
Yep.
But I feel like my more obtainable dream stuff is I really want at some point to own a Porsche Boxster.
Yep. Okay.
I need to own one at some point. I'd like to try one at some point to see if they're as good as I think they are.
Yeah.
Because you've got one in the fleet. How do you find the Boxster of that era, the first gen Boxster?
I love it. Yeah. Would you want to borrow it?
Yeah, we'll do that at some point. That'd be nice to give it a go.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Honestly, like, I worked it out the other day. Like, that car spent, I think, a year or two with our friends up in Scotland. Not 2 years, but at least a year, I think. Basically helping them out and keeping them in a Porsche while they didn't have one of their own. And then a friend of mine was thinking about buying a Boxster, so we lent it to him, I think, for about a year or so. This is my partner's car, and she didn't have her license at the time. She's just about to get it. And that's a whole other topic. Anyway, so we've only really had the car ourselves. It also lived in Scotland for a little bit where my other half's parents are, and they became quite attached to it. So although we've had the car for about 4 and a bit years now, we haven't really had it ourselves for much more than about 6 months. It needs a few bits doing to it, but it's perfectly drivable. It's a lovely thing. So yeah, no, we just come and borrow it for a week or something. Live with it.
You'll have to live with a Maestro for a week. You will. You'll have to live with a lowered Maestro.
I'll tell the missus we've done an exchange.
She'll go out and say, James, what the hell is that? I think I don't know. You should try like living with a classic for a little bit, like a more kind of modern-ish, but 80s. Let's be honest, it's an 80s car, kind of classic.
Well, I had my 944 Turbo S for a little bit. That is a genuine 80s car. Then I had the 968, which is only an evolution of it. I mean, they're all related to the 924, which is a 70s platform, but a very, very good 70s platform.
Well, the thing is, it's not a fast car, but what I have done is I've fitted a subwoofer to it. It's got a subwoofer, it's got a Pioneer radio and some slightly upgraded speakers. So what you do is you put the windows down, you enjoy the breeze. The sunroof works as well. You enjoy the air coming in. You do 70 miles an hour at 4,000 RPM, so you actually spend everywhere going 60 miles an hour because you're not killing the engine. You just cruise. You cruise and you try not to hit the sump on the ground, which is only 3 inches from the ground. That's why I had Josh Gresswell, actually. Who's an amazing fabricator. He's been in a little bit of YouTube news recently for reasons we're not going to go into today, but he is such a nice guy and he's so incredibly knowledgeable as well for his stuff. He's phenomenal. But anyway, I brought the car down to him in Cambridgeshire and he welded 5mm steel reinforcement plate on the sump, so if it does hit anything, at least it won't bend it in and get caught on the pickup tube. But so you'll have to try that for a bit. And the other one I want is a Morris Minor again, because I bought a Morris Minor and my heart was over my head. I've told you briefly about this story, and that was one of the worst cars I've ever bought. I'd always known the car in my area. It's this lovely kind of olive green Morris Minor. But he used it. He kept it outside. He used it through the salt and snow. And I think in the end, that's what did it in.
Yeah.
But thing is, he owns quite a lot of more expensive cars. He does a lot of work. So we've chatted, because I love working on cars.
Yeah.
Working on cars is something that's so important to me. It's the connection you get when you have repaired something on your car and you go out there and it is working and you just feel so much more connected to that machine, because it's weird when you love a car and you've fixed it up, it almost becomes a part of you.
Yeah.
I know it's really, really weird like that. But anyway, he was normally meant to be quite good at work on his cars. When I bought it off him, first and reverse didn't work. I knew this. So I'd got a gearbox, got that all to go, and these are other signs. When we were test driving it, kept flooding and it kept doing weird things and stuff like that. But it was only $1,000, I know, but I still bought it anyway.
Yeah.
He said, oh yeah, there is a little bit of rust under there. You just need a small plate, a small patch. And I thought, okay, that's fine. I'll get that done. Because it hadn't had MOT since 2017. This was 2023. It had a lot of time to corrode and it was covered in underseal. So I didn't really see much rust under there. And I ended up getting it back. My friend Harry, who you've met, who has a lovely Morris Minor, I said, come down and have a look at this. And basically, my friend Harry, who knows the cars, he broke my heart. He pulled the seats up. He looked at this, that said, there are holes here and 4 holes there. That is rusty. That is rotten. The suspension is barely a hang on. In fact, somebody has tacked parts of the suspension back together, so it's not even safe in the slightest to drive. Because I ended up having to break the car for bits. Yeah. I took the engine out and I sold that on. I sold the shell. I lost about 500 quid in the car and all. And is a lesson to be learnt there. Be very careful with who you deal with.
Well, I had it not too long ago when I bought my MG ZTT, and look, it was a purchase off Facebook Marketplace from the other side of the country, and it was up for 500 quid as a basic. Look, it's actually quite a good car with a lot of history, does need a few little bits doing to get it through the MOT, so you're like, this is good, because they're being honest that it's got some flaws.
Yes.
Because what you don't want is a 500 quid car that apparently is perfect, because such a thing doesn't exist, right? And said, look, yeah, I'll get through the MOT if you do this, this, and this to it. And I thought, you know what? For the sake of 500 quid, I'll buy it, send it to the guy who's like the specialist for 75 and ZTs, who's a lot closer to the car than I am. So I'll get it trailered over. I got it sent. And when it got dropped off, they phoned and said, oh, the poor delivery guy had a hell of a time because, the car wouldn't start. And I was like, well, why wouldn't it start? He's like, well, it wouldn't start because there's no battery in it. What? Well, there's definitely a battery in it because there's a battery in the photos. Also, like, you don't just casually take the batteries out. Like, I mean, look, if I bought a CD player off eBay and there weren't batteries in the remote, you go, oh, okay, whatever, I'll put new ones in. It's £1. But you're like, this is quite serious. Like,
80 to £100 for a good battery.
Yeah, right? It's nuts. So there then ensued a debate between myself and this chap where it very quickly transpired that actually the guy who was listing the car wasn't the owner. I then said, okay, can I speak to the owner, please? Why? Oh, because I'd like to get my battery back, please. He's like, well, you can come and collect it. I was like, no, you can post it to me. Oh, no, I can't post a battery, mate. I was like, right. But it didn't just fall out of the car, did it? Somebody took it out of the car. And what really irks me, right, with this stuff, it's a 500 quid car, right? If you said to me, by the way, it's 500 quid, but the battery that was in it is dead. We've put a temporary one in there, but it's not coming with the car. I'd have still bought it, but I'd have bought a fresh battery and sent it over. And it boggles my mind that people try and go out of their way to hide stuff when in reality, like, just be honest. It's a 500 quid car. Like, of course it's going to have issues. Of course the tyres probably need replacing. Yeah. Of course the brakes. When I buy cars like that end of the market now, I just assume that the tyres and brakes need doing. And generally speaking, especially like brakes, it's not that expensive. My MG ZS, I had to do a full set of discs and pads, and it cost me something like 150 quid.
Yeah, not much.
It's not a huge amount of money in the grand scheme of things. But for some reason, I had such a trouble with MGs in particular. Every single one of them that I bought, there's been some sort of issue with. And half the time, people just weren't aware. The other half the time, oh, you were definitely aware. You were definitely aware. I feel for you, though, over the loss of the Moggy, because one of the cars that I really wish I had, I've got absolutely zero interest in the Morris Minor. I think it's a really cute old British classic, and that's about it. I think people have offered me one. For some reason, I just haven't reviewed one, but I would love to drive one. However, I'll never own one. But my grandfather did have a Morris Minor pickup.
Okay.
I remember hating it because I don't think it even had a heater.
No, I don't know if all of them did. I think some of them were optional or something like that.
So if it did have one, it didn't work. That's for sure. And unfortunately, when he passed away rather unexpectedly, the Moggy sort of disappeared, I think, with one of his relatives. Yeah. And unfortunately, it was never to be seen again. And that saddens me because I would have loved to have had that as a little bit of granddad.
The worst thing about this Morris Minor is the owner who I bought it off had let me drive it shortly after he got it, and that's what made me fall in love with Morris Minors.
Yeah.
So when it came up for sale, I was like, I have to have that Morris Minor, because I'd always ask him, when are you going to sell it to me? Oh, when can I buy it? When can you sell it? And this is where the problem came from. I let my heart go over my head, and I didn't do the full due diligence, because I wanted that car, and I thought, yeah, I've got somebody who weld a patch in, and had I just been going to see any other Morris Minor that wasn't that one, I would not have bought it. I would have looked at that and gone, that's too far gone.
Yeah.
I just would have.
Do you know the best car buying experience I had? It was buying my 968. I went to go and see it. And bearing in mind, they're a modern classic Porsche, but they're not particularly valuable 968s, not compared to a 911 for sure. And I went to go and see it, and this chap had a sort of ordinary sized house with a garage, sort of next to it. And I got there, he opened the garage, and first thing he says is, right, the car's not been run since yesterday, so it's nice and stone cold. Would you like a torch so you can look underneath it and check the condition of it?
Yeah.
And he just like, yeah, this is how it should be.
Do you know what? That's exactly how I sell my cars. I'm one of those people who I have very strong ethics and morals about things, and buying and selling cars is one of them. I would not like to have happened again what happened to me with the Morris Minor, and part of that was my fault. So whenever I sell cars, I detail every single thing down to the littlest bit that didn't work. Like when I sold my Mazda, one of the things I had in the listing was the door strap on the rear right door doesn't hold it in place, so sometimes it closes itself.
Yeah.
How many people would normally put that kind of thing in there?
Yeah, right.
That's every single thing that was wrong with it. Everything I knew, I wrote down, I put it down, I got everything when they came in, all the service history, I let them look at everything. I took it, I let them take it out. I said, yeah, I've done this, done that, because I don't know if you've seen on the bonnet of my cars, I have a label printer, and I label print whenever I've serviced things. I also am highly autistic. Yes, that is true. But I label everything, put it all down, so people can see what I've done. And I think, if I'm going to sell a car to somebody, the last thing I ever want is somebody to come back and say, you've sold me this piece. You didn't tell me this was wrong with it. How dare you? I've got to get kids to school on it, things like that. And that's kind of that's just who I am anyway.
Yeah, I like to think that every car I sell has left me a bit better than it, the condition it was in when I got it. I mean, I know for a fact. I still need to do a video on my XJ because we spent a fair bit of time doing that. The guys up at Auto Reserve Jaguar were fantastic and helped me out with that. So that car, that was actually an MOT failure when I had it. But we managed to get it sorted and so that it could then pass a legitimate MOT, because who does it help to get a dodgy MOT? All that's going to happen is you're going to get in trouble, and maybe your MOT tester will as well.
Absolutely. You offered that car to me at one point at a very good price.
Yeah.
And I just wish I'd been in the position to take it, because I know it's like, it's not the right colour, it's not the right this and that for you, but I look at it and think, actually, I kind of like a light.
For the money I got for it, I really should have just kept it, but I'd committed to selling it.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. And my MG ZTT, I mean, the Jaguar I lost about $2,000 on.
Yeah.
And the MG I lost about $3,000 on, because I bought it for 500 quid. I think I spent about $3,000 on it, so I sold it for about like 800 quid or something.
As I said before, man maths. It's just man
That
maths.
was not man maths. That was not even man maths. That was just bad maths, right? It was terrible. So,
well, I'll finish up by saying with my, I think my attainable dream cars that I want to have at some point is, at some point I'm going to be done with my Maestro, whether it's next year or the year after. It won't stay with me forever. I've made that decision. It's not going to be a forever car.
You don't want to be Maestro man.
No, I don't even mind being Maestro man. It's just a case of, I think now I've saved it and got it up to a good point. I genuinely think that other people should enjoy it for what it is. Somebody else should own that and be the custodian of that vehicle as well. And hopefully with the history and the way it's been done up and sorted, that might be a car that will last for a while and be that tangible connection to the past that we still have.
Yeah.
So when that goes, a forever car I want to put in my fleet is definitely a Morris Minor. It's got to be the right one. And I want to do it sooner rather than later, because nice ones are getting expensive.
Yeah.
It used to be you could get a good one for 2, 3, 4 grand. Now they're 8, 9, 10 for really good ones. For really
a
nice
moggy?
ones. My friend Harry, I think he paid about 8 grand for his, but his had been restored, painted before previously, and his is like up there, in my opinion, from some of the really nice ones.
Wow.
So, I mean, I'm happy to have one that's not, perfect, but I don't want a rotter.
No.
So that's there. And I need to get a Nissan Figure. I've mentioned it before. It's the car that my wife likes. And do you know what? It's not often me and my wife get to share passions over cars.
Yeah.
And if there is one car that she loves, it's the Nissan Figure. And I'm like, do you know what? Even if that's the only classic car I end up getting in the future, we will have one because it will be something we will both enjoy and it will be a bonding point for us. Because we're very different people in many ways. And it's nice to have those shared interests. And I think it's if I can do that with her over something I adore, which is cars, then that's a win-win for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last one I think I'd like to have, as I mentioned, probably a Porsche Boxster, some convertible of some sort. I think that's obtainable. I believe that's obtainable with working hard, playing my finances right, and hopefully YouTube taking off, that I might be able to do that.
And shall we, before we sign off, finish off with just a few more of the questions sent in to us by the good people of the internet,
Absolutely.
which is always an interesting place. Thank you to everybody that sent in, and apologies to the many people that we're just not going to be able to get back to. Alan Hamzik wants to know what the best Alfa ever made is, in our opinion. You clearly like the Giulia Quad.
I do. I also like that the 164, I think it was. They
Oh yeah, no, the 164 is really cool.
Yeah.
I drove one of those. I really liked it. I think that's actually one of those cars where it really is as good as the BMW equivalent of the day.
Yeah.
I like some of the other stuff like the Alfettas and the Juniors and stuff like that. They're cool, but I'm not familiar with them to sort of say, oh, that's a GTV or whatever.
Yeah.
I think for me, in the modern era, they're all deeply flawed but interesting cars. I quite have a thing still for the 156 GTA.
Yeah. I think those kind of 90s 2000 ones, some of them looked so beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Is it the 147 that Mr. Furious has? Is it the
hatchback?
The hatchback one?
Yeah, it might well be.
I think that's quite nice as well.
Which German car has the most personality? Asks Maximush 1984.
Oh, do you know what? That's hard to say.
Would it be like a Beetle or something, do you think? I mean, if you're talking about actual pure personality...
Well, are you thinking the more modern Beetles or the older Beetles?
I'm not thinking of the one with a fake flower on the dash, that's for sure.
No, it has a personality. Whether it's one you want to be involved with is a different story.
The personality of a serial killer, I think.
No, I like the old Beatles. I had a drummer in the band I used to be in had one, and I remember it was so cool, just like going around. His was decked before. His was Volkswagen scene stance and everything, and it was a like beige. I think it had like bright orange wheels with the chrome caps on or something like that. And that was quite fun. That was interesting.
What about, this is from Taron Carlife, your thoughts on white wheels or rims? See, now to me, as an owner of a car with white wheels, I think white wheels are the wrong choice for 99 out of 100 cars. But for that one car,
you've got them on the Celica, haven't you?
Got them on the Celica.
And I tell you what, that Celica looks stunning with those wheels on. It's like black wheels. A lot of people say if you put black wheels on your car, you have no taste. And I can understand that on some of them, but there are some vehicles I think work with black wheels, even though I'm not a huge fan of them all. I'm more of a kind of a silver wheel person personally.
Oh, here you go. For both of us, from Obi-Wan PH, the non-car YouTube channels that we watch. I've been watching a bit of Gamers Nexus recently with the long-haired lovely that is Steve.
Yep.
A bit of Fail Army as well. Do enjoy a bit of that. A Giant Freaking Robot does a bit of film discourse. And actually, I normally hate film discourse and stuff, and he's not a film critic. He's very keen to point that out to me. But I love his stuff, mostly because I think he loves the sort of films that I do. What about you?
So there's a few people I watch. One of them is a good friend of mine called Tom from a channel called It's My Natural Colour. He is just like this the most chill Welsh guy you've ever met, and he does similar stuff to me on content and computers and electronics and things like that. And he's just a genuinely nice human being. I watch a lot of a guy called Cathode Ray Dude.
I love that name. That's brilliant.
It's great, and he goes into these absolute insane, like hour-plus long ramble fests on like weird technology from the 80s and 90s, and he's into like film and TV stuff too. But it's rambly, but it's packed full of knowledge and information. Like, you'll have to watch it. It's some serious good stuff if you need I'm awake late night and I can't sleep and you need a rabbit hole to go down to. Obviously, Lazy Game Reviews, or was it that? No. LGR, the him guy, he does a lot of tech stuff as well. It's like somebody puts you on the spot. Let me look at some of my subscription lists very quickly. There was a guy I was watching, and let's see where it goes. Ringway Manchester, he's another great one. He does a lot of stuff on the history of radio and telecommunications and things like that. And he's an amateur radio guy. Good. He's really good. And V Westlife, he's somebody from America. He does a little bit of car stuff, but it's mostly old technology as well and things like that. A lot of audio gear and things, and I think you'd enjoy him as well.
Oh, I like the sound of that. Well, there we go. That's a few other things for people to listen to when they're not enjoying the latest episode of the Radiator Arms. Will and I want to say a big thank you, and we look forward to having Ant back with us in a pretty short order. And make sure if you haven't already to hit that subscribe button by whatever medium you listen to or watch your podcasts. And as ever, we're still looking for feedback. It's still a new venture. Please let us know what your thoughts are, both good and bad. We value them all. I just don't promise we listen to them all. So, let us know, and we will see you next week. Don't forget, we are up at 7 o'clock on a Monday morning, ready for you to get to work. Bye now.
Goodbye.